I can't wait to talk today to you, Charlie. An advisor out in Montana, and been working with us for how long now?
2 years.
2 years. Wow, I can't believe it's 2 years. And you have such an awesome, fascinating story. This isn't your first career.
No.
So you went to school to do what when you were younger?
Dentistry.
Dentistry. And now you're a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. It's amazing how God has a funky way at times of changing your life. I went to school to become a pastor, and I've always been a financial advisor. You went to school to become a dentist, and now you're a financial advisor. I don't think I've ever asked you, Kevin.
I started out as a mechanic.
And now you're a financial
And now I'm a financial advisor. Yeah, that was a fun story.
So awesome. Well, I would love to hear a little bit about your background and about your career as a dentist, but I'd really like to talk about the latter years of your practice and what happened for you to not have to be a dentist anymore, and then now you're a financial advisor. Like, what happened?
I've been practicing for about 17 years, and it was Halloween night. My wife had picked up some juice, natural, no preservative kind of juice at the store that morning, and it was really cold out. Kids were out trick-or-treating, and so I was talking to my sister on the phone, and I went to the refrigerator, pulled out this bottle of apple cider, and took 2 steps over to the sink to set it down, get a glass out to, put some of this stuff in a mug and throw it in the microwave. And the bottle exploded in my hand, my right hand, and it severed tendons, arteries, veins in my thumb, the palm of my hand, and affected my index finger. So, it just blew up, and I was crazy because I could look down into my hand, and the blood was just spurting out. It's kind of sorry.
This is a PG show, man. What? No.
Yeah, sorry for the graphic.
Now we gotta put gore up on the top of the podcast.
Yeah, well, and so I grabbed a towel, wrapped it around my hand, and I didn't realize how bad. I knew I cut myself badly, but I didn't know how bad. And yelled at my wife. I said, she was out in the living room, and said, "Honey, you got to take me to the hospital."
Yeah.
So, and my daughter was in high school. I think she was a junior maybe. So we go to get in the car, and my daughter hops in the driver's seat, and there's all these little kids trick-or-treating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she takes off. We had this Suburban, and my wife's in the back. I'm in the front seat, and I'm yelling at my daughter, slow down. I was more worried about
the kids,
hitting somebody. And anyway, we get to the hospital. They start poking around at my thumb and, said, "Can you feel that?" And I couldn't feel anything. And sorry.
That's okay.
You're good.
That's
Give me a second.
Yeah. Transition. When you go through something as traumatic as that, it's
bandaged me up. Should come back in the morning. And so I go back in, they put me out and they operate on my hand. The problem was the nerve damage.
So as a dentist, I guess this is things that as a financial advisor or any other profession, so like dentistry and surgeons, this is this is how you make money.
Right.
So if anything ever happens to these digits,
you're done.
You're done.
Yeah.
And this is what actually ended your dentist career.
Yeah.
So this bottle, what brand, what was it? Like,
well,
how did it explode? Did you ever find out?
Yeah, well, so it was an interesting thing. So we had some people at the house, and this lady very carefully picked up the bottle. All the juice went down the drain, literally down the drain, right? So there was, some residual juice that had dried on the inside of the bottle. And so I live in a small town. So my attorney that I worked with called me one day and said, "Hey, I heard this happen, you want to come in and talk about it?" So I said, "Sure." So I go in, and long story short, I sent the bottle off to a glass expert at MIT to tell me what happened.
Yeah.
Because if I was going to sue somebody, I had to prove that this thing exploded and that I didn't just, accidentally break it and cut myself. So we went through that process, and that was expensive. And I think it cost me about $25,000 to have the guy
Figure.
confirm the fact that it
Jeez.
blew up.
I've never heard of anything like that.
Was it from the gas that?
Well, so it was a natural product,
Mm-hmm.
and the expert said it probably was E. coli. The bacteria built up in there,
Oh,
and
geez.
you grab it, and it's cold, and your hand warmed up the glass, and that reaction, it exploded. And so,
Crazy.
anyway, crazy. Interesting thing about that is I had a patient who was the manager of an Albertsons grocery store, and he said this happens all the time. He goes, we put juice out in the store, and next morning we come out and there's 2 or 3 bottles that just blew up, and we clean it up, and so it happens all the time. And
But this time affected your entire life.
yeah, and I had another friend who was a banker, and he told a story about him sitting at the Sunday morning with his family, and had a bottle of orange juice at his table, and it blew up. And he said it missed everybody, but there were shards of glass stuck in the sheetrock in his house. Yeah, so you just don't ever hear about it, but apparently it does happen.
So here you are the next day, you knew something bad happened. You've got nerve damage. Let's fast forward a little bit. What's going on in your mind knowing that your career as a dentist is potentially over?
I just had this faith that I was going to be fine, And so after the surgery, about 2 weeks later, because the tendons had been cut, one of them that they had stitched together popped loose. So they had to go back in. And when they went back in, they could see that the nerves that they tried to sew together had come loose. So they did it again. I spoke with several expert hand surgeons, and they said every time you go in and operate on it, more adhesions, nerve's not going to heal.
Scarring, yeah.
So, and I had 3 operations because it was determined that the nerves were not healing properly. So anyway, long story short, what was going through my head was, I thought, no problem. I'd do my physical therapy. I'll be back. Give me.
So you
6
at first you weren't thinking it was
No,
over.
at first I just thought I'm going to be, this. I asked the doctor, how long is this going to take to heal? He said, well, your hand will heal in about, 6 months, but the nerves, we don't know how long that's going to take for them to come back. And they never did, obviously never came. So I had no proprioceptive touch. I couldn't feel, when you pick something up. And so as a dentist and you've got sharp things and a handpiece that's going 400,000 RPMs, not a good deal, So, and I went back to the office and I tried to do stuff, just kind of practicing, like picking up an instrument, and, checking to see, and they go to the dentist and they have their little Explorer, a real sharp thing, and they're poking around on the top of your tooth, and I just couldn't feel anything. I couldn't feel how hard I had to press to, so after about 8 months, so this happened in October. So it was about August, I went in, and I'd been to a hand surgeon in Rapid City, South Dakota, and he referred me to a hand surgeon in Denver. I went down and spoke with him. They just said,
it is
you're
what
done.
it is.
And so I had to retire.
What was the draw to being a financial advisor? Like what?
This is kind of a funny story, but I had one of my closest friends and my roommate in college. He became a compliance officer, big firm out in San Diego. And he always said, he goes, you ought to be a financial advisor. He said, you could sell disability insurance and just knock them dead because you're the poster boy, right?
Mhm.
Tell your own story on that
Yeah.
one. Right?
Yeah.
You can,
And so I always kind of thought, but I had a really close friend that was that lived in Bozeman, and he was a municipal bond trader, institutional bond trader. So he was talking to the big boys every week. And he said to me one day, he goes, you ought to come do this with me. And I said, I don't want to do that, And he said, no, you really should. He said, you'd be pretty good at it. And it really never I just thought, I mean, calling these guys and trying to sell them a muni, the big bank or something.
But there was 2 indications from 2 different people who knew you. This is the direction you got to go.
Well, yeah. So, let me backtrack a little bit. So about 6 months after I retired, the financial advisor in the town I was living in Wyoming took me to lunch, and he said, I'd like to hire you. I think you'd be a really good financial advisor.
So it's the third
one.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I said, I don't know. And he goes, no, you'd be really good. So I really did think about it, but I wasn't going to stay in that town. So I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I'd worked with a consulting company that works with dentists to teach them how to run their businesses as a business. And so because I had that background, when I got my Series 7 and 63 license with the Muni people, this was in 2008, 2009, market crashed, and they said, yeah, nice job. You got your license. We don't need you. So then my buddy from San Diego called and says, I think you should be do this try and work with, the public, physicians and dentists and stuff. So that's really what happened is I had those licenses and I thought, okay, I can really help these people because, there's more to retirement planning than just managing money. You really have to look at any situation and help people plan for it because you just never know what's going to happen down the road. And, so that was kind of part of my mission is to make sure that I'm going to work with somebody that I got all the bases covered for them. I don't want them to go through an event like
you
I
went
did.
through. Yeah. So that was your driving factor is this crazy thing happened to you and it happened in a place that ruined your career.
Right.
Which for a guy like me, it's like God did that on purpose because he wanted you to go from what you were doing to something else. Now you're like, okay, the very thing that changed your life was the very thing that became the motivating factor to do this next career, right?
Yeah. So, when you're in the health profession of any kind, I mean, you're really there, in my opinion, because you want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my nature. So I just figured this is my way to still give back. The motive was for me to be able to still help people, and so, yeah.
So when you first talked to everybody, there was three people and you were kind of hesitant. What got you over that hump to say, yeah, I'm going to go down this path?
2008.
That was it, huh?
Yeah. Cause I called my financial advisor at the time, stockbroker, great guy, really good guy, the market crashes. But I had, before that happened, when Lehman Brothers went under, I called him and I said, I know you're not supposed to go to cash. You're supposed to write it out. But, and the market had probably dropped at that point about 15%. And I said, I just want to go to cash. I mean, this is crazy, and then the next bank failed. And then, he goes, oh, no, write it out, it'd be fine. So I did. I mean, I went, from the top to the bottom like everybody else. Right.
Okay.
And had I known what I know now, I could have survived that, but
a lot better.
Yeah. But, and it really made me angry because he just, and I look back and I don't fault him one bit because that's just the training, you don't get out and, as you well know, you can't get out, because you'll miss things and it has a huge impact on your returns. So the way we do it is way better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
you were loving life, dentist, crazy thing happens. Now you transition, careers to being a financial advisor and have been since 2008, doing much better now. It's not necessarily what you set out to be, but it's exactly what God wanted you to do this point in your life. For people that are out there that are, in between careers or in between jobs, like what advice would you give them to help them understand like, hey, you were, I mean, all intents and purposes, like you burned, like your career was like over in a little micro explosion in your hand. What would you tell them?
Well, I think you have to really search in your heart, because if you think trying to think through the problem, I feel like it's you get too logical, kind of like, okay, but I think it's people, if they can search their heart with what they really, you hear stories about people saying, I quit my corporate job and now I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do.
Mhm. You do hear that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And so, I think that if people really, first of all, pray about it, second of all, really search what's in their heart, I think that they can figure it out, but it's not an easy process to go through.
No, I can't imagine.
I'm curious, through all of this, your wife, your kid, how much did that solidify your relationship after going through all of this, and then, seeing what you're doing now?
You mean my relationship with my wife and my kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, total support. It rocked their world. And, my wife I'm married up big time.
That's good.
You
That's
traded
awesome.
up, right? Yeah, good for you. Yeah.
Yeah, she was incredible support and always has been. So, yeah. And my kids were young enough that it was, my daughter was, like I said, she was a junior, and I have 3 kids, and my middle son, a sophomore, and then I had a little tag along that was, he was in like 4th grade or something when this happened. So,
Tag along.
yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, just before we close down here, tell me, like, what's been one of the most satisfying situations, client stories that you've had since, being a financial advisor. You were set out to change people's lives from their teeth. Now you're affecting their wallet and their security and their ability to create income for the rest of their life. Has it been satisfying? Is there any great stories that you can share that is just like, yes, this is exactly what I should be doing? I know you feel that way, but
yeah, there's a lot of fun stories. One in particular, I ran across this person, and I didn't know what he really did. He said he worked for the church. He told me this incredible story, how he had been scammed out of his life savings. He's a priest, and and he lives in Michigan. It's interesting because he's just the sweetest guy. Almost $700,000 of money that he had saved got scammed out of it. And so, I don't know how grace of God, I guess, connected us both together, but he needed help, and he wanted to figure out what he should do. And his first inclination was to do something that, really wasn't going to be good for him. And so, I was able to help him and get him straightened out and get him, a financial plan put together. And this guy is going to rock it when he decides to retire.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And just other things too. Like, I've got a lot of young physicians. I really have kind of a calling for that group, and just to help these people get off on the right foot.
Yeah.
So that, they're well taken care of. And, that means a lot to me. And also, people that are, retired, I just want to help them, I just want to help them.
From the standpoint of helping people in your dentistry to the standpoint where you're helping people now, what's the difference?
You have to do an exam, diagnosis, and treatment plan, right?
Okay, good. Yeah.
So, and I really relate how I, go through and talk to people when I first meet them. It's kind of like, doing a medical history, only it's a financial history, But and actually, one of the first questions I ask people is, "Are you healthy?" Because, that's
Today, as a financial advisor.
Yeah. Because that's a big deal. My brother-in-law just passed away from Alzheimer's, age 74, and it rocked my sister's world, obviously. And, so there's just things that people never think are going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just a way to, I really feel compelled to help. So yeah, you sit down and same process: exam, diagnosis, treatment plan.
Awesome.
Where's it hurt?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, this has been fun, learning a little bit more about your story, even though we've been working together for a long time. It's been good to get you on the show in town here in Charlotte. And thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.